It's obvious, having said all that, that it's much more easier to construct a world view that is a coherent abstraction that assimilates all your abstractions rather than leaving them fragmented, as is most often the case with moderns, where they can have multiple segmented opinions about things, each one contradicting the other, so they don't have to really assimilate them into one harmonious whole. Of course, there are the rare cases where they do make an entire worldview, a coherent worldview. And we call those philosophers. Philosophers tend to aspire to do this, to take the abstractions that are fragmented inside their brain and to assimilate them into one whole, a unity, an absolute. Philosophers create absolutes. That is, they create one singular worldview which would explain everything about the world. Now, there are two forms of philosophers. Those that are restricted by the world, that is, their senses, which limit how they can assimilate these abstractions. And there are those, the nihilists, which don't really care. They're just interested in creating a cohesive whole, a harmonious whole, which then has to be evaluated by how seductive it is, how they appeals to others, how popular then it becomes. And of course, what is detached from reality is much more appealing to the average mind than what is attached to reality, because reality is threatening to the organism. An organism needs an exclusion of possibilities, like I said. It needs ordering, whereas the world has its own order, which may contradict that of the organism, or may include chaos, that is, random dynamics, which the mind refuses to accept or is unable to conceptualize, so it rejects it. This is the most threatening thing about the world. It's chaos. It's a plausible, chaotic nature. The mind would rather understand world as something that is rational, that is completely governed by rational laws, even if they are contrary to it, rather than accepting that there might be certain things about the world which are irrational, counterintuitive, which no mind can ever understand, which is unknowable, that is forever mystical. The only mysticism the modern understands is the mysticism governed by complexity, or what is hidden, the yet to be seen, the yet to be discovered, the beyond. This is what Christianity is. There's this order in the universe, and it rests beyond time and space. For the secular humanist, the modern, this beyondness has become more earthly. It's become an immanence, again, based on Spinoza. It's become something yet to be. It's coming. It's future. So paradise for the Christian is something that rests outside time-space, whereas for the modern version of the same nihilism, it rests as a utopia yet to come. And of course, there are also the different types of philosophers, thinkers, like I implied earlier. There are those who engage reality, face it, and try to make sense of it, even though it restricts their the way they can combine abstractions to form a cohesive model. And there are those who want to completely detach from the world in order to just fabricate whatever combination they prefer. Their only criteria being that it's appealing, it's internally harmonious. That is, the model is in harmony with itself. It makes sense within its own premises. Its logic is self-referential. Now, these models are the most, these philosophers are the most abundant. They're actually the part of the majority, because it's the easiest way to think, with no external world restricting how you combine abstractions. You can simply be guided by some internal ideal, basing it on how the abstraction feels, what's the pleasure potential in it, or how it is harmonious within its own premises. That is, you don't have to adhere to anything external to yourself. You just have to adhere to what you already decided is an absolute, and then come up with ways of harmonizing everything you perceive into that. This is what I've called the top-down, backwards thinking. It's the easiest form of thinking, and this is why it's the most popular. It is also the easiest way to construct the most appealing, seductive constructs, philosophies. And it is the ones that are also more popular amongst the masses who have no such ability to think beyond their immediate gratification. I've gotten into this form of thinking as a form of sexual signaling by males in the video I made on self-handicapping. So here, in the human context, the mind having no big cost to its detachment from reality can fabricate a peacock's tail of such extravagance, such self-handicapping bird weight, that its only appeal is as an impressive display of the male's virility. It has no survival utility outside human premises, as most of this thinking has none. The same way as the peacock's tail. The peacock's tail, I'll just give you a brief synopsis. Whereas the feathers of birds were evolved to help the bird survive, to give it the efficiency of fight-flight, the peacock's tail does the opposite. It actually makes the peacock, the male, unable to effectively fight or fly. So this is why it's called the self-handicapping. And with humans in the philosophical arena, this happens also. So without any cost to your thinking, you can fabricate any bullshit you want. It could be useless outside of human premises. But if it's impressive enough to attract, if it's so over the top, and in fact this is the difference, because in the wild the peacock actually suffers the consequences of this tail that it uses. It actually eventually gets killed by predators. Whereas with humans who are protected, sheltered, this is not the case. They are protected from their own weakness, their own stupidity. So the extravagance becomes, it snowballs. It just increases. So that it becomes a competition over who can fabricate the most extraordinary, extreme, most impressive worldview, which also remains self-harmonious, because it has beauty to it, just like the peacock's tail, and yet it's totally useless in any other context outside of human relationships, human signaling. And signaling is another word for semiotics. And another word for semiotics is language. And a part of language, you can equate it to a sperm. So what a sperm is to genetics, words are to memetics. So language is a form of replicating a meme, and the word is its sperm, its DNA. So without any cost to the word being completely useless outside of human premises, it becomes just a matter of how impressive it can be, how seductive, how appealing. And how do you appeal to other human beings? By offering them pleasure, especially when they have no other concerns. Their survival is pretty much guaranteed. They have certain rights within the system. They will be fed no matter how stupid they are, or if they're crippled or if they're weak, they will be protected by an institution, the police force. No matter how poor their judgment is, there will always be somebody, something to step in and protect them. Because this is the fact, they become bored. So their only way to get rid of this excess energy which accumulates is through sexuality, the libidinal release of excess energy, which is also happens through the nervous system, and through entertainment, and through this hyperbole, through this ideology of the exceptional, the extraordinary. So now that the male role has been diminished, because the male was the one who was the provider and the protector, and because the institution now has taken over this role, making the male pretty much obsolete, what happens is sexual relationships, sexual courting, has become more of a feminine game. It's become more feminized. So how do females signal their fertility to the male? By their beauty, by their symmetry, their proportionality, by certain organs in proportion to what organs, like the hip to waist ratio. This is how they signal the skin tone, and so things like this. Of course, in more times we use artificial means, to make up for whatever deficiencies we inherited. So now the male, without this feminine need for him to protect and to provide, how does he attract? How does he stand out? How does he impress? Well, with the exceptional, the extraordinary, the hyperbole. Given that even this, if it doesn't exceed a certain point, or if it doesn't contradict the system that offers him this protection, in other words, it doesn't conflict with the interests of the system itself, it could reach any proportions. It can be as delusional, as extraordinary, as totally detached from reality as it can be. Its only rule is that it remain, first of all, communicable. I mean, that means that the words used, the symbols used, have to have meaning to the others who the male is communicating his virility to. And the second, and this is where the competition happens, the construct, in this case we're talking about philosophy, the cohesive worldview has to be self-referential and cohesive. That means every abstraction in it does not contradict the other abstractions. It has to be harmonious to itself. This is where the competition is, how to construct something of beauty, no matter how detached from the world it is, no matter how absurd it is, no matter how useless it is, or no matter how detrimental to survival it is, if it would to be applied in the world directly and honestly. It's the world itself, that imposes restrictions on the organism and on its thinking, and subsequently on the words it uses. For instance, the sequence of how words are used is not arbitrary. It's not just decided by the organism. It is imposed upon the organism, if it is interested to adhere to reality, by linear time. That means causality. So one precedes the other. One phenomenon precedes the other. One proceeds the other. So you cannot use consciousness as preceding life when there is no evidence of this in existence. The world that is precedent, your experience, imposes this limit on your conceptualizing, and your words, your language, have to reflect this. Otherwise, you're just talking nonsense. So you can't say one concept precedes the other when it's never been found in nature. It's never been experienced in the world. Now, the only reason to do this is to escape the world. The only way you can survive this delusion is if you're sheltered within the world by some other entity, some other being, perhaps an institution, some other organism. Then you can fabricate any nonsense you want, or you can believe any nonsense you want. You can put it in any sequence you want, even if you then contradict yourself if you apply it. But you can believe it within your head as long as you don't have to apply it. You don't have to actually live by the consequences of applying it. And this is why nihilism is only possible in modern times, when the institutions, human techniques and technologies have advanced to such an extent that it creates the shell, this sheltering. But not only this, it's only plausible in a world where husbandry, that is the manipulation, the control of minds of animals, of organisms, has reached such a level of sophistication that it has gone beyond just the simple coercion using the threat and promise mechanism. Here we have the method of brainwashing, of manipulating emotions, of convincing the organism of what it most desperately wants to believe is so, and in this way making it a participant in its own enslavement, making it a participant in its own brainwashing. This is the world within which nihilism flourishes. It's the only place it can flourish, because if it were to apply itself honestly outside of these premises, it would soon perish, or it would be forced to, as usual, lie, contradict itself, as nihilism always does throughout history, from Christianity to Marxism, all based on this fantastic conception of the world and of man within it, which could never survive within the world. So they had to then apply violence to impose their rules, or it had to brainwash the masses, trying to impose their delusions upon the masses. And this is where we can now understand the appeal to nihilism, because like the peacock tail, it is so impressive, so extraordinary within a world that scares, that threatens, that restricts. It's what the moderns call, this is what the moderns call by open-mindedness, this idea that everything is possible. Of course everything is possible once you're taken care of and you're not inhibited by any other factor, like survival, like your existence. Everything is taken care of, everything is pretty much guaranteed. So then you can just release your imagination and make it as fantastic, as fantasy based as possible. Only restricting yourself to the rule, and this is the only rule. First of all, it's the dictionary rule, which is imposed upon communication for the purpose of communication. And there's the social rule, which is you don't contradict the delusion of your neighbor, so that he may also humor your delusion. This is the so-called golden rule, or it's called civility, or it's called respect. Pretty much it's the exclusion of self. It's a mutual understanding where both parties exclude themselves from natural selection. In this case, not genetic selection, but mimetic selection.